In 1976, an entire generation of children were introduced to 3 3/4 inch highly posable science fiction action figures called MICRONAUTS that were far ahead of their time. This toy line was introduced to the United States by a company called Mego, with MICRONAUTS being sold in the UK by Airfix. And while I don't personally collect MICRONAUTS, I am a Mego collector, so I am very familiar with this particular franchise. And now, after almost 4 decades in retirement, MICRONAUTS are finally making a return to toy stores. And thankfully they are being brought to us by a toy company that is known for its poor quality, overpriced garbage. That's right, that pint-sized garden gnome Brian Flynn has snagged the rights to MICRONAUTS, and they've been brought to you by Super7.
Come with me, toy fans.
As I'm sure you can tell from that intro, I am not a fan of Super7 the company or their products, and these MICRONAUTS are being introduced into the Reaction line. The Reaction line kicked off several years ago when Super7 first produced that series of prototype Kenner Alien figures, the 3 3/4 inch 5POA figures that were never actually released back in the day following the failure of Kenner's 18-inch tall Alien figure. And it is well known within the toy collecting community that Reaction figures are poor quality and extremely overpriced for what they are. For a very long time, the Reaction line of figures were specifically 5POA, until recently when Super7 started doing O-ring style G.I. Joe action figures. And since the original MICRONAUTS line was one of the true pioneers of that O-ring style action figure back in the 70s, I am pleased to see that the first 2 figures being offered are O-ring style figures. But that's all that Super7 are offering, 2 action figures. Now, first of all, we have Baron Karza, and I do really like the artwork on this particular card back. However, in the original vintage MICRONAUTS line, Baron Karza wasn't a 3 3/4 inch action figure. He was much taller, and I have one of these in my collection. You can see him displayed here next to some 8-inch tall Mego Star Trek figures, so you can kind of get an idea of the scale of this original figure. And the other MICRONAUT figure that's coming to Super7's Reaction line is Biotron. And in the original vintage line, Biotron was kind of like a Transformer. He was a toy action figure that was advertised as both a vehicle, a robot and a playset all rolled into one. And once he transformed, he could actually be driven by the original 3 3/4 inch O-ring styled MICRONAUT figures. Now, while I've seen a lot of fans online quite happy at this announcement that their beloved MICRONAUTS are coming back, I'm quite disappointed that the license didn't go to Mego, who were the company that originally brought this toy line over from Asia to the States in the 1970s. And I'm very, very disappointed that this toy line has ended up in the hands of that little gimp Brian Flynn. Super7 is a company that is completely devoid of creativity. They don't come up with any of their own ideas, they're just milking all of these nostalgic franchises. And sadly, most of these franchises are not given the love that they truly deserve by Super7. This initial offering consists of no more than 2 3 3/4 inch action figures. And at $20 a piece, I think that's very, very pricey for what they are. And mark my words, this toy line will not expand much further than this. Sure, we might get a few more 3 3/4 inch action figures, but that will be about it.
Do or do not. There is no try.
While the original vintage MICRONAUTS toy line from Mego was known for its 3 3/4 inch O-ring style action figures, it was also very well known for the amazing vehicles and huge playsets that complemented this line and built out that entire world. And there is just no way in hell that Super7 is ever going to give us a large playset like Micropolis. Sure, they might try and crowdfund an item like this, but given the fact that they couldn't get their G.I. Joe Cobra mothership off the ground through a crowdfund, I very much doubt they're going to achieve it with an even more niche toy line like MICRONAUTS. If you're pleased with this announcement that MICRONAUTS are returning, I'm happy for you. I just want you to temper your expectations, because it is very unlikely that you will get much more than a few more 3 3/4 inch scaled figures. You know, over the next 2 years, the range might expand to 4, 6 or possibly 8 figures, and we'll potentially get characters like Force Commander or Phobos. But that will be about it. Now, if you collect vintage MICRONAUTS and These are going to help you kind of fill out your display. I mean, if you've already got an original Baron Casa, I don't know why you would need a 3 3/4 inch version one, but if you want that version to mix in with your other 3 3/4 inch Micronauts figures, I get it. But if you don't collect vintage Micronauts, I don't really see the point in this. You're going to get just a small smattering of random action figures from a very niche, nostalgic toy line from the 70s, and there won't be anything more beyond that. So obviously I'm not a fan of these action figures, but I am very interested to know what you think. Would you have preferred it if this license had have gone to Mego, now that that company has seen somewhat of a resurgence over the last few years? Will you be collecting these action figures? Will they fit into your display? Do you think they're overpriced? Do you think I'm completely way off the mark and that this line will expand into vehicles, playsets and a lot more action figures? And most importantly of all, will you be purchasing them? Let me know in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.